that time of day. Welcome to this, the first overview and scrutiny meeting of the new administration. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I hope we can have a constructive journey over the next several years. The first item of business for this evening is the appointment of a vice chairman. Are there any nominations? Eric. Do this one. Anyone will do. Pick anything.
I'd like to propose Councillor Peter Boylan.
Thank you. I'll happily second that from the chair. Are there any other nominations? Thank you. Was that seconded?
Yes.
Sorry. Lovely. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's splendid. Okay. Well, we'll need to go to. Yeah, a vote. Yeah, let's do that. We'll need to go to a vote. So the first one out the hat was Peter Boylan. And Calvin, is Calvin here this evening? He's not with us. No. That's fine. Right, we'll take it from the start from Peter. Can we have a show of hands of those that support Peter's nomination? Any against? Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And Calvin Horner, those 4? Oh, I think that's fairly clear. Yeah. Any against? And are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Calvin Horner is duly elected as the Vice Chairman of this committee for the following year. It's unfortunately can't be with us this evening, but thank you for that. Apologies, we had quite a few apologies, sadly. Peter's going to help me. He's got the list.
Yep. Apology from Councillor Cox and Councillor Burt is substituting. Apology from Councillor McAndrew and Councillor Holt is substituting. Apology from Calvin Horner and Simon Marlowe is substituting. Apology from Councillor Williams and Councillor Watson is substituting. And finally, an apology from Councillor Woolcombe.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you ever so much for those people that stepped up. That's a great help. It's nothing worse than looking around the room and finding a lot of empty chairs. So thank you, and hopefully it will be entertaining, if not informative. Item 3 on the agenda is the minutes of the 21st of March. It's rather strange in that, with possible exception of 1 or 2 of the officers here, none of us were in the room. So we have that situation where it's a challenge, and I'm somewhat loath, given the business of this particular committee, to ask for your permission to sign them off at this stage. But I rather put it to you that it would be better if I watched the meeting, and I'm very keen to have volunteers join me if that's suitable. Just that we can, or I can, establish the accuracy of those minutes. I'm sure they are accurate. But I regret I've not had a chance to do that ahead of this meeting, but I'm very happy and prepared to do that before the next one and bring my conclusion to you. So I propose that we hold off on agreeing those minutes for the moment, because I don't think it's fair on you, and I don't think it's fair on me. So we'll do that. I must say, I've always found the minutes to be totally accurate. So this is not a reflection on officers in any way. It's just my way of doing business. Moving into Chairman's announcements, it's wonderful to see you all here this evening, and I look forward to working with you as long as you're prepared to put up with me. I do have some experience of scrutiny, but not at this level for very, very, very many years. I did do scrutiny here back in the days. Nelson and I knew one another, so it was a long time ago. The role of overview and scrutiny is a very important one, and it is recognised in statute. We have some fairly serious duties and we have some fairly serious responsibilities. And I'm sure all of us will be aware of authorities that have, and in some cases continue to fail. And in most cases, you don't really have to delve too far into the reports to establish that scrutiny was not allowed to function, and all members were not allowed access to the information that they needed to make or challenge decisions. So, you know, we have an important function. We are here to, in the best possible way, be a critical friend, both to the administration, and some of us are part of that, so that in itself is a challenge, and also to the officers. In my view, this committee is sovereign, and we will set out our own work programme, and we will go where the evidence takes us. It's vital that we ensure that scrutiny is independent, and it can only work effectively if you as members work with colleagues from across all parties and we all have an equal voice. Moreover, we constantly need to look to innovate and evolve and take every opportunity to involve our community in any way that gives us a good return. I will be working with officers to set up a workshop, and that will come forward shortly to consider our work programme. There is a work programme, but it's not our work programme, and I think it's important that we identify with our work programme, your work programme. And also, I'll be looking to identify training offers as we go forward. I hope and trust that you will support Calvin and I in ensuring that the East Herts residents' public pound is well spent during the course of this administration. I think that's enough from me, so let's do some scrutiny. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Excellent. Good. All right, well, we move straight over to item 6, which is the waste shared service. A complex and complicated setup, in that we work, as you know, with North Herts on this, and there's been a lot of work going on over the last many years. So I hand over to officers to give us quickly an introduction, if you wouldn't mind. Is that Chloe? Is that you? It's Tim. Tim, would you?
Yeah, not Chloe, unfortunately.
Oh, well, no. All good things will come in turn, I'm sure.
So good evening. Thanks, Chairman. This report is presented in response to the requirement of the executive report dated back in October 2022 for the shared waste services, and it's an obligation we undertook there to outline the governance and corporate support arrangement which will be put in place to support the new waste recycling and street cleansing contract, which comes into force in 2025. So these arrangements are designed to support the Council's goals around digital transformation and ensure that residents receive a consistent service across East and North Hertfordshire. The report does not seek major changes from the existing arrangements, i.e. what's been put through before, but identifies what's recommended that each council leads on their own customer service provision, with minor changes to governance and financial management arrangements, whereby North Herts District Council will lead on the expenditure management on behalf of both councils. Each council will remain, however, responsible for their own income management, and that will be facilitated by the shared client team function. Processes and policies will be aligned to support the new contract, and therefore minor updates have been made to the service policies, which will come into force in 2025. Finally, I would draw the committee's attention to a mistake in the published document at 3.12, which currently reads 2025, but in fact should read 2024. That concludes the overview, and I'd now ask that the committee receive the report and provide feedback on the proposals identified in section 1 for consideration by the executive. Do you want me to read those out, or is everybody happy that?
No, that's fine. No, I'm sure everybody's read it, but thanks, Tim. That's fine. Chloe, would you like to add anything at this stage? No, no, that's fine. Okay, I'll put it open to the floor. Eric.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify the point around the customer service functions, because it started off saying that the working group preferred a joint function, and then it moved on to having aligned functions but still separate. I think I can understand the benefit of that, because it would, if it ever needed to be unravelled, it would be a lot easier to do that. So I'm assuming that's the reason. I just really wanted to understand that that was actually the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions on that theme? If not, I'll ask that that be dealt with. No? Yeah, please do.
I mean, is it using the same software or is it completely different software, or have they been developed at the same time by the same people, or, you know, how would is it?
Are you talking about the digital service now, which
Yeah,
is referred, that's a bit further down the report,
right.
isn't it? Shall we come back to that? Could we deal with Eric's question?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Buckmaster. Yes, it's as you outlined, it is for reasons of, there were economies of scale identified in pursuing a joint customer service, but there were also disadvantages, and they're listed in the paper. There were benefits which outweighed those disadvantages of keeping the thing aligned and under joint governance in terms of changes to those services, so joint processes but separately delivered within each organisation.
I'm looking around. Any further questions? Peter?
Not a question, just a minor issue. There is another incorrect date, and that's on page 15 at the top, the date of the meeting, which is today. It's got the wrong year.
Time travel, one of our specialities, isn't it? Apologies for that.
Okay, from the chair, perhaps I could take us to 2.6. And a number of us obviously have benefited from working through the shared service for a number of years, both before, during and since its implementation, and therefore recognise the value of alignment. But it kind of suggests in 2.6 that whilst there have been some alignments, and I'd perhaps be helpful to know what processes has benefited. But interestingly, are there any? It kind of infers that there are one or two that are still proving troublesome. So perhaps we should have a few words about that. Which processes have been aligned to benefit, and which are continuing to be troublesome?
I think, yeah. Cool.
So Chloe Hipwood, Shared Service Manager for Waste. Essentially, we're talking relatively minor elements, but you know, some of those are hang up from our existing service differences. So you'll be aware that, for example, North Herts have 180-litre residual waste bins, and East Herts are only just moving to that. So that's just an example of where we have some difficulties. It creates inefficiencies in procuring bins, for example. If we can buy, you know, more of one type, it will provide us cost savings over the life of you know, our sort of shared relationship, shall we say. There are a few differences, therefore, in extra capacity provision we provide to residents who have you know, additional needs, and we have some minor differences around how we process things like assisted collections through our customer service teams and the role that the client team plays in some of those processes. So it's about ensuring that, as I say, there's sort of a consistent approach from a customer service end right the way through to the role that the client team provides for both authorities. You will also probably be aware, but might not be particularly familiar with the fact that North Herts currently have customer services delivered by the contract, so by Abasa as our current contractor, and that's going to change in the future. So again, we should see much more consistency from a customer service delivery point of view, with that being driven by the independent councils.
Certainly for my benefit, and I suspect others as well, when you say client team, what does the client team consist of? I guess it doesn't go all the way down to the trucks.
No, so the client team is essentially the team that sits, my staff. So we are employed directly by North Herts Council on behalf of both councils. So there's a team of 12 of us, or 12 posts, I should say, slightly different because of part-time working. And we are responsible for things like the financial management of the contract and the services, and of course the contract management, so performance management, and of course all of the data returns that we need to provide both to each council but also nationally. So that's our role in a nutshell.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to something in 2.7, but I'm going to invite Stephen to come back to his software question, which I think was probably more to do with the digital thing, which is a bit further down, but let's deal with it now.
Yeah, I was just wondering how efficiencies could be found. If you want to keep what level of separation between the two services do you need, and how is the software, the IT systems, how are they integrated?
This is not my forte, but my understanding is that they are shared processes, but not systems. So that the two councils will be pursuing independent transformation to accommodate the new contract, but they'll be operated separately. So in answer, I don't know what the answer to your question is about how further economies can be found, but I don't think they're in that space.
Aubrey.
Just following up on that, and thank you, Chairman, regarding, and it's mentioned later on in the report, in developing that online service, that there would be a level of communication between both teams in order to overcome any challenges, especially maybe with one of the councils having developed a system at greater speed than the other. Maybe you wouldn't be able to provide this now, but maybe at a later date, what would that level of communication look like? That kind of part, and would that be still considered a partnership? And what would that frequency of that communication be to really make sure that takes place? Or will that just be, a regular meeting every now and again? But it'd be good to, at some point, to understand what that would look like.
Yeah, sure. Noting the comment, I think we will undertake to come back to you in more detail on that. But for the time being.
So yeah, just in response to that, it's vital ultimately that the customer service function, which in turn is predominantly digital, going forwards, will support the waste service. It's one of the highest contact generating services in the council. So the idea is that the contract operates under one IT system, just to sort of answer your question. So we have one system, and that's currently the case, one system operating the collection rounds for both authorities, but there are indeed two customer relationship management systems, one at each council, so that each council can operate those with their own look and feel, essentially. But the processes inside those customer relationship management systems will be the same for both councils. So whether you live in North Herts or East Herts, you should receive the same level of service. In terms of that sort of, how will we ensure we're moving forward at the same pace and together? We're already meeting monthly with both customer service teams, looking at those processes. So we're building and developing and agreeing those processes behind the scenes as we speak. And then there'll be an implementation program once, as identified in the report, once we know who the preferred bidder is and we start to mobilise the new contract, there'll be an implementation period, which of course, the essentially respective transformation teams at both councils will be involved in and building into their work programmes.
Thank you.
From that, then, can we assume that a customer phoning in from either district would receive the same response, but they'd just be they would obviously be branded East Herts and North Herts?
I mean, that is the ambition. Yeah. I think it's probably in life dangerous to assume that it will happen. It's going to have to be engineered to happen, and the processes that we've referred to here try and keep that in tramline so that the experience is similar.
Because I think in the past there has been, residents have become aware that Urbasa are there in the picture as well, and yes, that has caused, I think, confusion. But I've not been aware of that for some little while, so maybe we are getting there. Could I take you to 2.7 and just where it mentions the collaboration agreement? I've got no argument with that, but I'm not sure I'm cited on it. Has the collaboration agreement been passed through members in any form?
I've been involved in discussions with my counterparts at North Herts around the interworking between the two authorities, especially from a legal perspective. I don't think it really needs to come before members because it's something that works in the background between my legal department and their legal department to make everything work. So I don't think it needs to come before members really. It's just to make sure that there's understanding between the two authorities that we get to where we need to get to.
No, that's excellent, but it does exist, and if we wanted to see it, it's available. Yeah, fine, thank you. Looking around again. The only other, sorry, Tom. Sorry, is it not?
Yeah, sorry, I've confused it when I go by my middle name, so Nahum.
Okay. Nahum.
Yeah, apologies for confusion there. Yeah, and thank you, Chair. You'll have to keep me honest here on who I need to direct this question to. But proposal 1.1 is that we recommend the updated waste policy, waste service policy statements to exec, and I was wondering what mechanisms in place to review those. Just because once they've come into force, just because we are making a sort of fairly dramatic change to customer experience here, and you know the policies look sensible to me, but doubtless there'll be tweaks that are needed or things we haven't quite got right. And so I was wondering, you know, how does that get reviewed once?
This is the overview and scrutiny committee, and at this phase, with something as fresh as this, it's fundamentally an overview function, I think, that we're performing here. And under normal circumstances, the Vice Chairman and I, together with you, would be looking at this and thinking possibly in terms of maybe in perhaps 18 months, 2 years' time, once we have laid down some evidence, we would then scrutinise what has happened, whether the policies that we put in place have delivered. If they haven't, why not? What we need to amend it. And have officers correctly interpreted our wishes? And are we supplying best value to the residents as a result? So, you know, we come at this before, during and after. And very valid points, and that's in 18 months' time, we sit down and we think about whether we'll have a lot of other things to scrutinise as well. Let's be clear that we will potentially have to compromise, but certainly something as big as this, which is, as the officer has alluded to, faces all of our residents every week in some form or other, will clearly, and has the potential to be extremely expensive if we get it wrong. Will clearly, I suspect, be up there with the best of them. Eric.
Thanks, Chairman. I might be going beyond the remit of this particular paper, but tell me if I am. There are policy assumptions in the inter-authority agreement. Of course, there are lots of unknowns still around resource and waste strategy from the government. Still hasn't been confirmed. We've heard in the last few days extended producer responsibility and potential payments coming to local authorities could be delayed. So is the inter-authority agreement flexible enough to actually handle those things? Because we're going into a procurement phase, and I guess that will have a bearing on the results of that. Thanks, Chairman.
So in terms of the contract, there have been various provisions built into the procurement exercise and contract to manage any potential changes that might come in as a consequence of the resources and waste strategy. But we have had to, a certain extent, guess what the most likely ones are going to be. So those are dealt with slightly differently, and ultimately there will always be change in law mechanisms within any contract to manage any fundamental changes. It's a difficult time to be procuring because there are a lot of unknowns, but we hope we've put together enough flexibility in what we've got so far. In terms of the inter-authority agreement, it's unlikely to affect that. There might be some changes to how the client team function needs to deliver data to central government, for example. But in terms of, fundamentally how we operate on behalf of the two authorities, that won't really change. So it's more to do with, the impacts on the contract. And of course, anything fundamental would come back to executive anyway.
Okay, that's pretty much, I think, it. Nobody else is indicating. The one thing I would perhaps ask, and I'm not sure whether this is for Tim or for Chloe, but is the staffing holding up? Because we're all aware of a terrible shortage of HGV drivers and various other things. Are we managing to hold our own on that front?
The service has ongoing issues with staffing, recruitment and retention across the board. It's a continuous recruitment drive, and we are obviously engaging with bidders about what their solutions might do to improve our recruitment and retention. But it's not unique to us. It is very much across the board. Drivers have become a little bit more stable than they were immediately post Brexit issues. But yeah, we do continue to have issues, and some of that's to do with where we are and location of depot and things like that. So there's lots of factors involved in that. But we're managing to operate the services, and we have some good, or I say we, our contractor Abasa have some good agency contracts, which means that where we are struggling with permanent employment, we are managing to backfill with agency.
Yeah, that's a comfort. But as we know, the agency resource comes at a price. Without getting deep down and dirty with the operational side of life, are we taking any steps to be a little bit bold, daring and different, and perhaps encourage those staff that do have a track record of sticking with us? Maybe they might consider driving. Will we do anything to support or help that?
So broadly speaking, in terms of costs, that we're shielding from those because of the way that the contract operates. But in terms of doing anything differently, last year we were involved in conversations with the LEP, for example, and looking at additional recruitment drives. So Abasa attended some careers fairs to encourage, consideration of the waste sector as much as anything else as career options for school leavers. So we have tried different things, but it is a bit of a movable feast, and unfortunately we're still not the most attractive place to work, out collecting refuse and recycling in all weathers ultimately. So yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much. That's I think that's pretty much it. Could I invite members to go back to page 15 and have a look at the recommendations. And there's also so the recommendation is on page 15. And then we have some proposals on running on to 16. So we take the recommendation first of all. All content with recommendation A? Can I have somebody propose it, please? Somebody second, Eric, Caroline, thank you. And likewise, the proposals 1 to 1.1 to 1.4 on page 16. All content? Eric's proposed. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you very much. We need to take a vote. We'll take both. We'll take those together if you don't mind. All content? Yeah, none against, no abstentions. Super, thank you. Our first piece of business. We look forward to it coming back in due course for scrutiny. We might not be so kind to you then. Scrutiny is different. I wear a different hat. No, excellent. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll want to stay for the whole meeting because it's going to be absolutely thrilling. But if you did have other calls on your time, then please don't feel you need to stay. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's move on now to I'm floundering now. It was something to do with Sue is looking at me. It's the council tax support. I can feel Sue's eyes boring into me. Yeah, thank you. So, who's going to lead on this?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Chairman. I'm Carl Britton, Executive Member for Financial Sustainability. So I'd like to present the report on the Council Tax Reduction Scheme for 2024-2025. It's a government requirement that this is given annual approval. The recommendation is that the scheme remains unchanged for 2024-2025 and is monitored with relation to caseload numbers, changes to universal credit, and opportunities to maximise automation and efficiency. We'll bring a further report to members early in the new fiscal year for the following year scheme to account for changes and to bring forward recommendations for change at that time. The scheme has been the same since 2013, and there's no persuasive argument at the moment to make any changes to it. This will also give the advantage of additional certainty to residents in this difficult financial period. We're here to seek support for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first and overbearing question for me is why has it come to Overview and Scrutiny and why doesn't it go elsewhere or indeed to the Executive and full Council in due course? Or is it on that trajectory?
Sorry, your mic isn't on.
I turned myself off. Apologies. I'll start again. The report has traditionally come via Overview and Scrutiny to enable Overview and Scrutiny to contribute any views they have towards before it gets to the Executive, which is happening in July, the 11th of July, thank you, Carol, and then following on to Council as is a requirement of the government that is cleared by Council each year.
Okay, no, forgive me for asking the question. It's just that as a resource, Overview and Scrutiny is stretched like everything else. And if it's an exercise of rubber stamping, I'd rather it went somewhere else. But if it's something that we can add value to, I'm very, very pleased to see it. Eric.
Thanks, Chairman. I've seen this many times before, but I think one of the good things about bringing it here is it demonstrates the officer diligence in actually sense checking it every year and then presenting to us. So yes, it might be viewed as a rubber stamp in some ways if Council is making the same decision every time, but I think it's worth going through the process. So I'm in support of it coming before members in this way. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can add value, and that's what we're here to do, then I'm all for it. I'm looking around. Any comments from the floor? Points of clarification, queries, questions? Please.
I would just like some clarification on the issue of bad debt. It seems to be one of the balances you have to achieve is if you were to increase the tax burden on the poorest people. You're saying that the bad debt will increase. Is there any sort of numbers put to that?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. The way the tax base is calculated, where the cost of this benefit sits, is made up of many factors, including the overall council tax, the amount of reliefs we grant in things like single person discounts, disabled reliefs, empty homes, premiums and empty home properties, that kind of thing. And this forms a smaller part of that. The cost is about 6.6 million over 135 million of the total tax base. We look at the collectability of the debt for those people in receipt of council tax support, and because it is a small number, if you think it's about 5.5, just over 5,000 households compared to sort of 60-odd thousand in overarching, the impact of this individual bad debt is relevant because we don't want these individuals to build up debt every year. So we work with them. We try and work with people to relieve themselves of debt by paying small amounts regularly, being flexible with how that happens. But we do look at the overall collectability of all debt. So if we added up everything we think we can raise in the tax base, we then say, well, actually 98.2% of it is collectible. So that protects and gives flexibility within it without saying to county, for example, as the biggest preceptor, you can definitely have this amount of money. We build in a provision there to protect all people, particularly the district council, who has to pay the precepted figures whether we collect it or not. So it's part of the calculation on the accountancy side, but specifically we're interested in protecting the individuals from building up a debt each year, because it's not just a one-off, this is every year they have it. So we look to work with those and work with them closely to try and alleviate and facilitate smaller payments where it's necessary.
I just understand that this is a burden on both the taxpayers and on the council to some degree.
The support given to residents is effectively, I don't like to use the word, a burden on the tax base. It deflates the tax base, so it deflates the amount of money that the council can generate in income for other things. The amount that the individual household has to pay, you could use the term, it's a burden on them, but it's a contribution towards the local services they receive. Am I not getting your question?
No, I meant the burden was being driven into debt, and it would be something we would want to avoid for the people falling into debt and the costs associated with their debt.
Yeah.
And it's expensive for us to.
Yeah. If we made the scheme less generous, for example, at the moment it's worked out in a liability for working age people of 91.5% of their actual gross liability. If we made the scheme less generous, so they had to pay more, then you'd also have the cost to the council of additional collection costs. So I would have to ask for more staff because we'd be spending more time collecting the debt. So there's a balance to be struck between at that level, and we've keeping the consistency for the last 11 years. Customers know they've got to pay a small amount towards their council tax. We're working with those people on a regular basis to enable the debt to be covered, and changing that now in an environment where there are so many other changes in income, I think would put an additional burden on our residents, as well as then for an additional cost on us running the service to collect the income. Is that?
Thanks. I've just remembered something I read yesterday, but I can't find where it is in the paper. I think there was a reference to the fact that those on universal credit assumed their council tax was included. And I think that meant that a debt built up over time, and therefore we were finding that at a later date when it was a bigger problem. Are we on top of that? Thanks, Chairman.
Sorry, thank you. We do try. We're looking at ways that when we get any information from the DWP, if there's a universal credit information that we can actually try and write out to people to encourage them to apply to us for council tax support. The staff are very active in when we send out first reminders when there's an arrear or anything like that to say, have you claimed council tax support? So it's a very much on the front foot of engagement as early as possible. What we do find, sadly, is those people who need perhaps a little bit of extra help, who don't engage with us when they're struggling, may build up a period of arrears. But we do have a small amount of money in the scheme of things for hardship relief, which we're happy to use to try and mitigate when we can't backdate council tax support under the regulations, etc. So there are various ways and means, but it is very much, and also we invite members to, when they're engaging with their communities, to raise the awareness of council tax support to all their community, because it may not be the person you're speaking to who needs to know, but they might know somebody who could do with that extra help. So thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. As much for my own education as anything else, 312 lists some of the factors that are considered when you're thinking about changes to the scheme. I was wondering if you could just kind of expand on that a little bit and talk about which of those factors are most important, and like just at a high level, like what you would need to see before recommending that we made any changes here.
Well, for example, the cost of council tax, the cost of the scheme falls on the tax base, which means, for example, and I've got my ready reckoner on my early page, that county pick up 75. I'm going to say, yeah, 75.85% of the cost. Police pick up 11.24% of the cost. East Herts 8.96, and then the parish and town councils another 3.95. So any change in the cost of the scheme is borne by those people, and that's why the government require us to consult with the police and the county on any changes, or even the fact that we want to keep it the same every year, because it will affect their budgets and the ability for them to raise rates. So whatever we do, we have to look at, have we got an increasing demand that's likely to put the cost up? Would that have an impact on how much we could afford to give? For example, if the caseloads went through the roof, we might say, actually, we can't afford to have their benefit assessed on 91.5%. We'd have to look at dropping that or changing the qualifying criteria. So that would be one aspect. We also look at collectability, as Councillor here asked about bad debt. We look at the wholeness of our customer base. So if there are other welfare reforms going on where people are potentially losing money or being switched between other benefits, we would be conscious of the collectability of the council tax, as we are this year, not through changes in welfare reforms, but through the energy bill costs and things. We know that households are struggling with buying food and paying for the basics in life. So we're already experiencing that with customers and trying to help them to pay. So we'd be conscious of what was happening around us. Cost of increasing arrears and recovery costs. As we know, if we don't collect the money, we still have to pay county. There's an additional cost of collecting arrears because that's more resources in time. So again, that would be something we'd be looking at to make a decision. Rollout of universal credit is quite key. At the moment, we still have a lot of housing benefit cases for working age people who are, at some point, we are promised, will go into universal credit. But this has been dragging on for the last 10 years almost, of when that's going to happen. So people coming into benefits the first time who are of working age will claim universal credit unless they're in certain types of accommodation. Pensions will always be with us, so we'll always have that caseload. So if, for example, we moved all of the working age housing benefit cases into universal credit, we would look at how we could administer our scheme. We may be able to make administrative savings in-house, which would fund potential changes in the way that we administered the schemes. So there are a number of factors that we're conscious of and we match and monitor during a year, but we have to look at the national level of where the government's going, what's happening locally, as well as the impact on the preceptors and our own budgets that we have to look at. But fundamentally, we try to keep things stable for our customer base to enable them to know what they're likely to have to pay and help them to move forward.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was most informative, quite helpful. Thank you.
I'm wondering if it's a concern that with rising interest rates and a lot of economically inactive people, there are people who are going to struggle to pay the council tax who are not being identified yet. And have you thought about how you can identify them and help them?
Thank you for the question. Yes, my recovery team, my council tax recovery team, are very conscious of any engagement they have with customers who are saying that they're having difficulty to pay. They're signposting to agencies that can give them a health check, particularly those who are perhaps economically inactive, who could have a more holistic view of, could they have debts rescheduled? Could they have, arrangements made? Many people are unaware that each of the energy companies generally have provision that they can help people. So we're advising of the awareness of this. The council itself has had a lot of information on its website to help people manage these impacts that they're experiencing. So it's more of a holistic, it's not just the council tax team who are helping people to look at their financial situation. It's
as much about signposting the help that's available then. Thank you.
And on that, we, of course, are an important part of that signposting procedure. So if you need help from officers please approach them, ask them. They will give you the information you need to, because we're here to take it back out, not just bring it in. So, yeah, we are an important part of that. Let's not forget.
Ah, interesting. It'll be that one. Councillor Simon Marlowe, standing in for Calvin. I'm just curious about this. How do the officers feel about the fact that we have to go through this once a year, apparently? I mean, it seems like a huge amount of effort. And really? Do we have to do this? I mean, I can see the government is saying that we have to do this. But as a committee, do we think this is a good use of resources? And should we be going back to government saying, why are you doing this to us every year? Can't we have something a bit more stable?
Well, I don't think looking at these things from time to time is whether or not it's appropriate to do it every year is a moot point. But approach Julie Marston and put the question to her. She's our lawmaker.
Indeed, I will.
That's called passing the buck. I prefer to think in terms of delegation, but heck. No, thanks, Simon. That was an interesting point. But I mean, I alluded to that earlier. Do we need to be doing this? And the answers I've received thus far are yes. I will continue during the course of the year to look at various things and see if we need to do it or if we need to do it a different way. As I said, we will hopefully you will assist me in evolving the work we do. Please.
Can I just point out, Julia Marsden is not all our lawmaker. Oliver Heald is also.
Indeed. If Oliver's your man, and I have his phone number on speed dial. And indeed, for some of us, Simon McPartland as well. On page 65, that we consider whether the options around the scheme design should be explored further. I think we've considered that. There is a proposal as well, but I don't think we've got a proposal to put forward at this stage, but watch this space. So could I ask for your agreement that, to accept the recommendation A on page 65? I'd like a proposer and a seconder if you're so minded. Peter proposing, Madam?
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. And perhaps shall we vote of support in the normal way? Excellent, thank you. The next item is the overview and scrutiny draft work programme. As I've intimated, I think we need to look at that afresh, and I will be looking to produce a workshop where we can consider it in some depth. Thank you, Sue. As always, extremely helpful. Lorraine will take us through where we are at present.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick introduction. This is the committee's usual draft work programme. The Chairman's already mentioned that the function of ONS committees to be a critical friend and hold the executive to account for its decisions and to review existing policies and to consider proposals for new policies. In considering items for scrutiny, members should have regard to the Executive's forward plan and ONS Committee's terms of reference when setting its own work programme, which hopefully this year we can develop one for the whole of the civic year. To this end, and with the consent of the Chairman, we've already put in your diary a workshop which is planned for the 27th of July to consider possible items for inclusion in the work programme. You've already mentioned one tonight, which is the waste services policy statement that you might want to include. And it's hoped by holding a workshop to develop items for scrutiny, members will be better informed to plan their work, taking a longer term strategic view of the issues facing the council. And as you'll see, you have a scrutiny proposal form at the back of your papers on page 96 and onwards, and the flow chart which shows the initial scoping processes for considering an item for scrutiny. That's all I've got to add, Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. I've got nothing to add to that. I can't see this very much, but if you've got any thoughts, questions, whatever. 27th of July?
Yes, Chairman. It's already in members'
Yeah,
It's already in members' diaries.
it's in your outlook, so that's when we can sit down and do the post-it note exercises and thrash through a few ideas and see where we get to. So if you're content, to accept that item, we don't need a vote on that, do we? Well, we do need a vote, okay. So, a proposer and seconder, please. Caroline? No, didn't hear. Quick vote, slow vote. All good, excellent, thank you very much. I've not been advised of any urgent items of business. Sorry, Peter.
Can we just get a view about how many people can actually make that? I've already sent my apologies and Councillor Buckmaster has said that he can't make it neither. Good to have a workshop, but we need people there. I just wondered whether we got a number on acceptances for that.
I can
Well, I have accepted.
I can have a look in the calendar and track how many have accepted or rejected, but at the top of my head, I can't tell you at the moment.
I think if we can go for 70–75%, that's where the flag would be for me. But yeah, let's do that. Most of our diaries at this stage haven't really matured.
I wonder if you can explain how we might put forward an item for scrutiny. So who would we send the form to? We'd send it to you and just complete it?
Or me, it matters not.
Okay.
Collar me in the corridor or fire an email in and say, look, I've got this idea. How, do you think it's got legs? And we'll work from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just for clarity, on page 95 of tonight's report, there is a copy of the proposal form, which you can fill out.
These are already available in the Teams channel areas as well under scrutiny.
Yeah, but let's not hang up on forms. If you've got an idea, get it in there and we'll fill the form in later.
And can I just clarify, would you like those ideas before the workshop? Or at the workshop? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super. Thank you. Your keenness is much appreciated. Excellent. Good.
Sorry, Chairman. The form for completion that James has just referred to, if this is being published, the email address to send it to needs to be amended. There's a dot missing before go.
A dotty dot.
Yep.
Sugar. Over. That is a cunning plan to make sure it goes somewhere else. Okay, right. So there being no urgent business, just to remind you, I have committed to watch the last meeting and bring back a recommendation to you at the next one regarding the minutes, which I'm sure will be fine. The workshop we've discussed. The next meeting, the next proper full meeting, will be on the 12th of September. That means between then and now, there are several months, some of which you may well spend taking a break. So if you do, have a good one. Come back in September, vitalised, invigorated, and ready to scrutinise. I'll close the meeting at 19:55. Thank you very much.